Howdy folks, and welcome to Saddle and Sixskin. If you're anything like me, you appreciate a good story about the Old West, filled with grit, determination, and maybe a little bit of frontier justice. So pull up a chair, pour yourself a cup of coffee, and settle in, because today we're diving into a tale that'll have you on the edge of your seat. But before we get started, if you enjoy these kinds of stories, hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin for more tales from the Wild West. We're always adding new content. Are you ready to start on a journey to a wild time, full of challenges and unexpected alliances? Then stay here at Saddle and Sixskin. Remember to press that subscribe button or give it a like, partner. Elijah Stone, a man hardened by years of solitary ranching, found himself battling the unforgiving Montana elements. Yesterday's brutal storm had wreaked havoc on his eastern fence line, leaving sections of it splintered and scattered like kindling. It meant another day of back-breaking labor for hands already worn raw from the endless demands of his isolated existence. He dismounted with a grunt, kneeling to examine a shattered post. 3 years of solitude had honed his efficiency. 14 new posts were needed, at least. It was a dawn-to-dusk kind of job. The ranch, much like the man who tended it, was slowly fading. But Elijah had little reason to care beyond the immediate needs of survival. The land demanded his labor, and that was enough. Doesn't that sound like a hard life? I know if you like this hard life, just give the subscribe button a push. Suddenly, a woman's scream pierced the tranquil autumn air. Elijah's head snapped up, his hand instinctively reaching for the Colt at his hip. The sound came again, a raw expression of terror that shattered the stillness. It seemed to originate from the Winters homestead, just beyond his property line. "None of your concern, Stone," he muttered, but his trusty mare had already turned toward the sound, her ears pricked forward with curiosity. The call was coming from the neighboring property. Do you think he would stop there, or check it out? I do believe you will not stop there. I recommend the channel Saddle and Sixskin to all those who think the same as me. Have you done the same? Give us a like and subscribe if you think like us. You know you would like to do it. Against his better judgment, Elijah mounted his mare and rode toward the neighboring property. As he crested the low rise that separated their lands, the scene below froze the blood in his veins. In the Winters' muddy yard, Sarah Winters knelt half-naked in the dirt, her dress torn away, her arms desperately covering her chest. Vernon and Meredith Winters, her in-laws, stood over her, Vernon gripping a horse whip while Meredith held Sarah's clothing, her face twisted with righteous fury. Beside them, Sheriff Hadley stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, watching with detached interest. Wow, what did he do? I can't believe the sheriff is there. Looks like we are going to have ourselves a gunfight. Teach the harlot what happens to women who kill their husbands, Vernon spat, raising the whip menacingly. She'll leave this property marked as she is, Meredith added, tossing Sarah's dress into the mud. Elijah had crossed the property line before conscious thought even formed. That's enough, he called, his voice carrying the authority of his former life. Sheriff Hadley turned, his hand moving to his gun. This is family business, Stone. Stay out of it. Family business? Elijah's voice was dangerously soft. Looks like torture to me. Her husband died under suspicious circumstances, Vernon sneered. I can't believe what I am watching. It is going to get worse before it gets better. I wonder what is going to happen to the woman. We have the right to discipline our son's widow. Elijah's gaze fell to Sarah, whose eyes held not just fear, but something he recognized, a dignified defiance drowning in helplessness. It mirrored something long buried within himself. The law doesn't allow this, Elijah said, though he knew frontier justice often bent to wealth and influence. I am the law here, Sheriff Hadley replied, and Vernon's within his rights. In one fluid motion, Elijah drew and fired, sending Vernon's hat flying. Next one goes between your eyes. Vernon froze, the color draining from his face. Elijah dismounted, removed his coat, and approached Sarah with careful steps. He draped the coat around her shoulders without looking directly at her. "Now, this is a good man. He is a hero. You're coming with me," he said quietly. "This is kidnapping." Meredith shrieked. "Try to stop me," Elijah challenged, helping Sarah to her feet as he lifted her onto his horse. Sheriff Hadley's voice carried on the wind. "We'll get her back, Vernon. Her and that land, too." Elijah mounted behind Sarah's trembling form, one arm securing her as he turned his horse toward home, knowing he'd just made enemies of the most powerful people in the territory. I am always amazed what the most powerful people in the territory do. I wish they would just be content to stay out of other people's lives. Shadows lengthened across Elijah's cabin floor by the time Sarah stirred. She'd been half-conscious during the ride, shock and exposure claiming her strength as they crossed his property. Now, her eyes fluttered open, wary and disoriented in the unfamiliar space. Elijah sat by the door, a gun across his lap, his back straight against the wall. He'd laid out clothes, a faded blue shirt and trousers, both too large but clean, on the bed beside her. A basin of water and a bar of soap waited on the nightstand. "Looks like she is waking up. Is she going to be okay?" "She is going to be okay with a little help from Elijah. I wish you would subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin to give me a little help as well." "Where?" she began, her voice cracking. "My ranch," Elijah answered without looking directly at her. 5 miles from the Winters place. "You're safe." Sarah clutched his coat tighter around her shoulders, her eyes darting to windows and doors, assessing exits like a cornered animal. "I'll wait outside while you change," he said, rising stiffly. "There's food when you're ready." Alone, Sarah moved carefully, each bruise protesting as she washed away the dirt and blood. The stranger's clothes engulfed her frame but offered blessed covering. She noted the cabin's sparse neatness, a bookshelf with worn volumes, a table with 2 chairs though clearly only one was used, a small stove radiating precious warmth. How thoughtful of a man. He is a gentle man to be sure. On the mantel, partially hidden behind a tin coffee can, she glimpsed a photograph, a woman with gentle eyes holding a small boy. Sarah quickly looked away. When Elijah returned, he carried firewood, his eyes carefully averted. "You should eat," he said, nodding toward a bowl of stew on the table. "Why help me?" Sarah asked, still standing beside the bed. Elijah stacked wood methodically before answering. "Some things a man can't ride past." They ate in silence, Sarah forcing down food her body desperately needed. "I am glad someone gave her some help. She was at the end of the line and nobody was coming to help her." "Are you at the end of the line? Watch Saddle and Sixskin to give you a lift." Through the window, she noticed a small wooden cross on a rise behind the cabin, fresh wildflowers placed against it. Fever came with nightfall. Sarah's teeth chattered violently as exposure and shock claimed their due. Elijah hesitated, then placed another blanket over her, his calloused hand briefly touching her forehead. "Need to get your temperature down," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, his movements efficient but gentle. When delirium took her, Sarah called out, flinching from unseen hands. Elijah spoke quiet, steady words until she calmed. Dawn broke with Sarah sleeping peacefully at last. "I like the new flowers." Elijah stood at the window, watching smoke rise beyond his property line. The Winters homestead was burning. Sarah appeared beside him, swaying slightly, following his gaze to the distant column of smoke. Without a word, her legs buckled. Elijah caught her before she hit the floor, awkwardly holding her as silent tears soaked his shirt. "Everything I had," she whispered. Elijah stood motionless, supporting her weight, unable to offer false comfort, unwilling to pull away. "Poor dear. I would support her, too." A week passed in cautious coexistence. Sarah's fever broke, strength returning gradually to her slender frame. Elijah maintained a careful distance, speaking only when necessary, disappearing for hours to work his land. On the seventh morning, Sarah stood at the corral where Elijah struggled with a spirited chestnut gelding that refused the saddle. So, she will come in and save the day, and make sure that everything is all right. She does not need any help from anyone at all. And neither do you. You're fighting him wrong, she said, her voice startling after days of near silence. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Sarah slipped between the rails, approaching slowly. May I? The horse snorted suspiciously as she approached, but Sarah murmured softly, offering her palm gradually. The animal calmed, allowing her to stroke his neck. He's afraid of the cinch, she explained, demonstrating a different approach. Let him see it first. Elijah watched, impressed despite himself, as Sarah efficiently saddled the previously unmanageable horse. My father raised horses before he died, she explained, stepping back. It was the only thing my husband couldn't take from me. That evening, Elijah found Sarah examining his bookshelf, her fingers tracing leather spines with unexpected reverence. You read Whitman? She asked, surprise evident in her voice. Elijah nodded, uncomfortable with her discovery of this private pleasure. My father was a schoolteacher, Sarah said, removing a volume. These were my companions. When she didn't finish, something shifted between them, invisible barriers thinning around a shared appreciation for words neither spoke aloud in their daily lives. What a way to find someone who enjoys the same as you. Their tenuous peace shattered the next morning when Jasper Quinn, a traveling trader, arrived with supplies and news. Wanted posters in town, Jasper reported, glancing uncomfortably between them, for kidnapping, and, he coughed, defiling Vernon Winter's daughter-in-law. Defiling? Sarah's face flushed with anger. Sheriffs deputized men to search for you both, Jasper continued. Vernon's offering $50. After the trader departed, Elijah removed a second revolver from a trunk. Ever fired one? Sarah shook her head. Time to learn, he said, leading her behind the cabin. He positioned her hands correctly, standing close enough that she felt his chest against her back. Breathe out when you squeeze, he instructed. The gun's report echoed across the valley. Sarah's arms ached from the recoil, but her shot had struck the can. You were a lawman, she said, not a question. Once that evening, Sarah burnt the biscuits. Elijah's unexpected chuckle broke their tension, and Sarah found herself laughing, too, a rusty, foreign sound to both their ears. Do you want to learn more? Later, as firelight cast shadows across the cabin walls, Sarah spoke softly. My husband drank. When he drank, he used his fists. Elijah stared into the flames. I was hunting outlaws when influenza took my wife and son. Neither offered empty consolation. Some wounds needed acknowledgement, not comfort. The storm descended without warning, howling winds driving snow against the cabin windows in horizontal sheets. By midday, drifts reached the window sills, sealing them inside together. Elijah stoked the fire higher, acutely aware of their forced proximity. The cabin had never felt smaller. We need to talk, Sarah said, seated at the table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup, about what Vernon wants. Elijah sat opposite her, leaving a space that seemed both necessary and suddenly arbitrary. I'm listening. My father owned the schoolhouse property and 80 acres surrounding it, Sarah began, her eyes fixed on her cup. When he died, supposedly from heart failure, I had nowhere to go. Vernon arranged my marriage to his son, Frank, within a month. Frank was a drunk, Elijah supplied, recalling rumors from town. And violent, Sarah added, but useful to his father. The marriage gave Vernon control over my father's land. What he didn't know was that my father left papers proving my ownership. Why is the land so valuable? Water rights. 3 creeks converge underground there, enough water to control the entire valley during drought years. Outside, the wind moaned like a wounded animal. Frank died falling down drunk from his horse, Sarah continued. Vernon claimed I spooked the animal deliberately. Did you? Sarah met his eyes directly. No, but I didn't grieve either. Elijah nodded, understanding complicity through inaction. Your turn, Sarah said quietly. Why does a former lawman live alone on a failing ranch? Elijah's jaw tightened. For 3 years, he'd spoken to no one about Catherine and Thomas, yet Sarah's direct gaze demanded honesty in exchange for her own. I was a territorial marshal, he said finally. I was tracking the Blackwell gang when influenza hit town. By the time I returned, his voice faltered. They were already gone, Sarah finished softly. Elijah nodded, the familiar guilt rising like bile. I buried them myself. Resigned the next day. You blame yourself for not being there, wouldn't you? Sarah's hand moved across the table, not quite touching his. My papers are hidden beneath the schoolhouse floorboards. With them, I can prove Vernon's claims false. You want to go back? Not a question. It's my only chance for justice. Firelight danced across their faces as silence stretched between them. Outside, the storm raged, while inside, something shifted, an alliance deepening into something neither was prepared to name. We'll go tomorrow night, Elijah said finally, if the storm breaks. Dawn revealed a world transformed by snow and silence. But, I would not. Just too hard. Moonlight transformed the snow-covered landscape into an otherworldly plain as Elijah and Sarah rode double on his most reliable mare. They had waited until well past midnight, when even Vernon's most dedicated men would seek shelter from the biting cold. 2 miles more, Sarah whispered, her breath forming ghostly clouds. Every shadow concealed potential danger. Every sound might herald discovery. Elijah nodded, hyper-aware of Sarah pressed against him, necessity eliminating the careful distance they'd maintained. Her trust in him felt both a burden and an unexpected gift. The abandoned schoolhouse emerged from the darkness, its weathered clapboard silvered by moonlight. Elijah secured the horse in the shelter of pine trees, then surveyed the surrounding area. No tracks, he confirmed. But stay alert. Inside, the schoolhouse stood frozen in time, desks arranged in neat rows, primers still stacked on the teacher's desk, as though waiting for students long grown or gone. Sarah moved with certainty to the back corner, kneeling before a particular floorboard. Help me lift this, she whispered. Together, they raised the board, revealing a small metal box tucked against the floor joists. Sarah's hands trembled as she withdrew papers bound with faded blue ribbon. My father's deed and will, she explained, carefully tucking them inside her coat, and a letter explaining Vernon's threats before his death. Sudden wind rattled the windows, driving fresh snow through the cracks. The temperature plummeted as the storm found new strength. We can't ride in this, Elijah decided, assessing the whiteout conditions. They huddled in the corner furthest from the windows, sharing Elijah's coat and blanket, body heat their only defense against the dangerous cold. Sarah's shoulder pressed against his chest, his arms circled her waist, survival eliminating propriety. If we die here, Vernon wins, Sarah murmured, shivering violently. We're not dying tonight, Elijah replied, drawing her closer. Dawn brought clear skies and a treacherous decision, risk daylight travel or wait for darkness? Now that is the question, and I am not sure which one I would use. Both are going to put them in harm's way, that is to be sure. They chose caution, departing at first light. A rifle shot shattered the morning silence when they were halfway home. The bullet splintered a tree trunk inches from Elijah's head. Bounty hunters, he growled, urging the horse toward a ravine, offering cover. 2 riders pursued, gaining ground on their overburdened mount. At the ravine's edge, Elijah made his decision. Take the reins, he ordered, passing them to Sarah. Don't stop for anything. He slid from the saddle as Sarah's eyes widened in understanding. Elijah, no. Go. Sarah urged the horse forward as Elijah took a position behind a fallen log. The man is such a brave man. But, he can't take on both bounty hunters, can he? The first bounty hunter appeared, rifle raised. Elijah's shot found its mark, sending the man tumbling from his saddle. The second hunter circled back, firing wildly. Elijah ducked, losing sight of his opponent. A twig snapped behind him. He turned too late as the hunter emerged, a pistol aimed at Elijah's chest. A gunshot cracked across the ravine. The bounty hunter collapsed, revealing Sarah 20 yards away, Elijah's spare revolver steady in her hands. This takes strength. Are you enjoying Saddle and Sixskin? Give us a thumbs up. I couldn't leave you, she said simply. Something broke open inside Elijah, a door long sealed by grief. He crossed to her in 3 strides, one hand cradling her face as he kissed her with 3 years of buried longing. Sarah responded with equal fervor before suddenly pulling away, confusion and desire warring in her eyes. We should go, she whispered, unable to look at him. They rode in charged silence, only to find smoke rising from Elijah's barn as they crested the final hill. Vernon's men surrounded the ranch, waiting. Now this is just getting terrible. Vernon is out to get them for sure. Elijah assessed their situation with a lawman's practiced eye. 7 men ringed his property, 3 by the main house, 2 covering the barn, others patrolling the perimeter, all armed, all watching for their return. We could still ride south, he suggested, though something in him had already decided. Territory's big. Sarah studied the scene, her jaw set in determination. They'd follow. This ends here. That simple declaration solidified something between them, a partnership forged in shared purpose. This is for all the marbles. I am not sure who is going to come out alive at the end of this shootout. They separated, approaching from different directions. Sarah circled behind the barn, while Elijah used the creek bed for cover. Their plan was simple but dangerous: create confusion, then fight their way to the cabin, where Elijah's rifle and additional ammunition waited. Sarah fired the first shot, a diversionary blast that sent Vernon's men scrambling for cover. Elijah used the distraction to pick off one guard, then another. They converged at the smokehouse, breathing hard. 2 down, Elijah whispered. But they've seen our strategy now. Vernon's voice carried across the yard. We know you're there, Stone. In answer, Sarah fired again, striking a lantern that crashed onto the porch, flames spreading rapidly. The barn, one of Vernon's men shouted as another lantern exploded against the wooden structure. The horses. Sarah gasped, already moving. Elijah caught her arm. Too dangerous. We can't let them burn, she insisted, her eyes flashing. Something passed between them, an understanding that some lines couldn't be crossed, some costs were too high, even for survival. They moved as one toward the burning barn, firing continuously. Smoke provided cover as they reached the doors. Inside, panicked horses kicked at stall doors while flames climbed the walls. Working frantically, they freed the animals, guiding them through the rear door into the paddock beyond. As the last horse bolted to safety, a support beam crashed down, briefly separating them. Through the flames, Elijah saw Sarah silhouetted against the inferno, her face streaked with soot, her eyes determined. In that moment, clarity struck him with physical force. I feel like now there is a reason to live. You brought me back to life, he called across the flames. Before Sarah could respond, riders appeared at the barn entrance, Sheriff Hadley with 4 deputies, rifles raised. Elijah Stone, you're surrounded. Elijah met Sarah's eyes across the burning barn. One look communicated everything: they'd reached the end of their resistance. Weapons dropped with dull thuds into the dirt. Deputies rushed forward, roughly securing their hands. We are going to get out of this. Vernon Winters sends his regards, Sheriff Hadley sneered, striking Elijah with his pistol butt. As they were dragged toward separate horses, Sarah caught Elijah's gaze one last time. Her slight nod carried a promise rather than defeat. This battle might be lost, but their war continued. Separated in town jail cells, Sarah pressed against the bars, straining to hear Vernon's voice down the corridor. "Make sure Stone has an accident before the judge arrives," he instructed someone. "The woman's mine to deal with." The territorial courthouse buzzed with whispers as Sarah stood before Judge Wilson, her posture straight despite 5 days in a cell. Townsfolk packed the benches, hungry for spectacle. Vernon and Meredith Winters sat confidently in the front row beside Sheriff Hadley. Elijah, his face bruised from jailhouse accidents, stood separately, guarded by deputies. "Mrs. Winters," Judge Wilson began, peering over his spectacles, "you're charged with abandoning your home, consorting with Mr. Stone, and theft of Winters' family property. How do you plead?" "I contest the charges entirely, Your Honor," Sarah replied, her voice carrying clearly, "and I have evidence of crimes far worse than those invented against me." She produced the papers from the schoolhouse, now crumpled but legible. "These documents prove my legal ownership of land Vernon Winters has falsely claimed. They also contain my father's testimony regarding threats made against his life, threats Vernon carried out. It is time to pay the piper." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Judge Wilson examined the papers. Vernon's face darkened. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "I have witnesses to Vernon and Meredith Winters' assault upon my person, witnessed by Sheriff Hadley, who failed to intervene." From the back, Jasper Quinn stood. "I saw her condition after." "Judge, no woman does that to herself." Another man rose, the blacksmith. "Vernon's been boasting about taking her land since her husband died. Everyone knows it." Judge Wilson studied the documents, his expression hardening. "These appear authentic. Mrs. Winters, or rather Miss Miller, according to your father's will, these are serious allegations. They're lies." "If I may, Your Honor," Elijah interjected. "As a former territorial marshal, I recognize the signature of Judge Parker on those documents. They're legitimate." Vernon's face contorted with startling speed. He drew a hidden derringer. "You'll never take what's mine." The shot cracked across the courtroom as Elijah lunged, placing himself between Sarah and the bullet. He collapsed at her feet, blood spreading across his shirt. Deputies tackled Vernon as chaos erupted. Sarah knelt beside Elijah, pressing her hands against his wound. "Don't you dare die," she whispered fiercely. "Not when we've just begun." Judge Wilson's gavel crashed repeatedly. "Order. Vernon Winters, you're under arrest for attempted murder. Sheriff Hadley, surrender your badge for dereliction of duty." His eyes softened, viewing Sarah beside the fallen man. "Miss Miller, your property rights are affirmed, and it seems you found a good man there, despite our best efforts to hang him." 3 weeks later, Sarah sat beside Elijah on the cabin porch, watching spring's first tentative advances across the valley. His recovery had been slow, the bullet having narrowly missed his heart. "Land Office confirmed it today," she said, holding the official papers. "Everything's in proper order now, my land, and yours. Recognized and recorded." Elijah nodded, still moving carefully. "What will you do with it?" "That depends," Sarah replied, her hand finding his. "I was thinking perhaps a partnership." "I'm not whole," Elijah warned, voicing the fear that lingered despite everything they'd survived. Sarah's smile held understanding born of shared pain. "Neither am I. Perhaps, together, we make something complete." Beyond the porch, wildflowers bloomed over the small grave where Elijah had buried his past. Yet now, improbably, new life grew from the soil of grief, not erasing what came before, but transforming it into something neither had dared hope for again. Well, folks, that's the end of this particular tale from Saddle and Sixskin. I hope you enjoyed it. What a whirlwind of a story. From a solitary rancher battling the elements to a love forged in the fires of adversity, it just goes to show you never know what the Old West might throw your way. If you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin for more tales from the Wild West. If you really loved it, be sure to share it with your friends. Remember to like or subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. Until next time, keep your powder dry and your spirit strong.